Welcome back, and congratulations for making it this far into the psychology of human performance, what I like to call performing at your best. If you are new to this, remember that this first series, the 100 level series, looks at the basic principles and perspectives. Way back in the second video of this series, the 102 series, I talked about the biggest misunderstandings, misapplications, and myths about human performance. Remember? And one of them was the stupid question people ask called, what are your expectations? These people who ask such a question have no idea about the basic emphases of human performance. An expectation mentality in any kind of performance sets yourself up for frustration and eventual failure. Think back. Did you ever have what you thought was such a good performance coming up that you forced it? Did you ever have a frustrating performance that you thought would be great on it, and the harder you tried, the farther behind you became? This is all grounded in this expectation mentality. Expectation mentality takes us out of the present, the only things we can control. Expectation mentality prevents us from this natural outflowing. An expectation means it applies. I have to force something to happen in a prescribed way. And you can just see the veins of my neck standing out as I'm saying those things. Way back in the 1st century AD, there was a Roman philosopher who began life as a slave and elevated himself to great things, called Epictetus. Epictetus talked about this essence of control. He said the only things you can control are right here and right now. The past is gone. The future has not yet come to be, but we can only control ourselves, our emotions, our responses to situations right here and right now. 20 centuries later, psychology came up with a fancy phrase for this notion. They called it locus of control, of focusing on what you can control. That is your core. That's what you can do something about right here and right now. The founder of rational emotive therapy was a fellow by the name of Albert Ellis. And he is today in 2022 recognized as one of the founders of a behavioral approach to counseling and therapy. I met him once at a lecture he gave, and he was a nice, very shy, very introverted person. And he had a whole different slant on things. Here's something that I'll never forget. He said, when you say to yourself or say out loud words like should, could, must, gotta, oughta, you're setting yourself up for failure. When you say to yourself, it should be easier than this, it ought to be more fair than this, I must be perfect this first time doing it, I just gotta do something perfectly right the first time. All these shoulds and coulds and musts and gottas and oughtas are what Albert Ellis called masturbating. Do you know somebody who spends so much time masturbating? Their whole mentality, everything they say comes out with should words, could, must, gotta, and oughta. A good exercise for yourself is to keep a running total on a little note card for a week. Draw a line right down the middle and just put a mark every time you say one of those 5 dirty words: should, could, must, got to, oughta. Just put a mark on that. More subtly, on the right side column, put a mark down on how many times you say something going into a practice or a rehearsal or a performance where you say something to yourself with those 5 dirty words: the shoulds, the coulds, the musts, the gottas, the oughtas. I think if you do this for a week, you will be amazed how many times you either say these words out loud or think these words. And the more sensitized you become to these dirty expectation words are the ones that you set yourself up for failure or disappointment. What goes on in our heads, what comes out of our mouths, do have a reflection of what we're thinking and feeling, and indeed can become. Expectation mentality is also grounded in this notion of being a perfectionist. When I was a psychotherapist in private practice, and I would have a new client come to me and say, well, I'm a perfectionist, I would mentally hit myself in the head saying, geez, this is going to take a long time. Hopefully they have a lot of money to pay me for this. Because perfectionists, no matter how much they force perfection, never do achieve perfection. Perfection is unreachable. Yes, we can strive for mastery, but perfection is with a meaning without any faults. And we have, all of us have faults. The suffix of the word perfect, fect, means to fall, as in infect, fall into, defect, fall out of. The word perfection means falling through. The ancient Romans looked at perfectionism not as the absence of faults, the way we've bastardized that notion today. They looked at perfectionism as falling through life, living life, experiencing life. One of my favorite videographers, you might have been aware of him, was a fellow by the name of Bud Greenspan. From 1972 Summer Olympic Games, those tragic games, all the way until his death in the early 2000s, he made a video movie of every Summer Olympics Games and every Winter Olympics Games. And he would always weave in wonderful quotes. Here are a couple ones talking about perfectionists that can come to mind. He said, there are no great people. Rather, there are great challenges that ordinary people are forced to meet. Perfectionism is an illusion. Yes, we can strive for mastery, for competence, consistency. And those are the things we can control. He also said, never look to the ground for your next step. Greatness resides in those who look to the horizon. So this expectation mentality that has its cousin of perfectionism are things that we think we should be striving for. Those are illusions. And really, both of those are performance boomerangs that come back and smack us in the head. One thing is to be aware of these things. The next thing is, well, what's the alternative to an expectation mentality? And this is principle 3. Learn how to accept rather than to expect. Learn to accept rather than to expect. An acceptance mode means that you are building upon those things you already have. And in fact, an acceptance mode helps you put yourself in a position where you can actually improve. Those perfectionists who are on an expectation mentality never have the motivation to improve on something. They keep on focusing on what they don't have, what they haven't achieved. Learning to accept builds upon your strengths. Learning how to accept sets you at the foundation to build upon what you have, to build more of those, and also put you in a stronger position to work on things to continue to improve. Expectations are ones that draw us back. Being accepting sets us forward. Accept what you can do right here and right now. Accept who you are right here and right now. Accept what you believe right here and right now. Sometimes we need failures Accept your failures, accept your foibles, accept your disappointments. That's grounding you in reality. Expectations are a fantasy world. A perfectionist mentality is a dream world beyond that. Ground yourself in the here and now. That is principle 3, is learn how to accept rather than to expect. One thing that Bud Greenspan said is that the honor should not go to those who have fallen. Rather, all honor should go to those who have fallen and who have risen again. It's not how many times you fall down, it's how many times you get back up. He said, falling down is not failing, staying down is. Typically what happens is people with an expectation, perfectionistic mentality, once they fail, they stay down and they give up. People with an acceptance mentality understand that failing has the seeds of new lessons to it, accepting those previous results and accepting what you can do based on what you have right now. That's where continuous improvement goes. Accept who you are, accept what you're doing right here and right now, not as a means of rationalizing why you're not performing better. Accepting grounds yourself in reality. I hope this makes sense to you. It may be subtle, and it is significant because our mentality that we bring situations in define our emotions and define our output, as you will see throughout this series. Learn how to accept who you are and what you can do right here and right now, and emphasize that which you can control right here and right now. That was principle 3, learning how to accept rather than to expect. This is a double barrel video because I'm going to share with you right now principle 4 of the psychology of human performance. And this revolves around goal setting. We are goal-oriented creatures. Think about it. During your day, you have goals of what to achieve. You have goals if you're running errands, where to go to what place first. You have goals during your practices or rehearsals, what to emphasize. You have goals of how to improve those things upon ourselves. We're goal-oriented creatures. A goal gives us a blueprint from which we can start making some plans or some action steps. But also having a clearly defined goal puts us in a position to gain some initial direction and momentum from that. I have always used, when I'm talking about goals, my twin A's in describing and constructing appropriate goals, and that is appropriate and attainable goals. Sometimes we set lofty goals that are outside of our reach, thinking we can achieve those. Setting those goals too high that are inappropriate or unattainable are ways of demotivating ourselves. Having goals that are appropriate, that fits in to what we have been doing, what we are capable of right now, appropriate by accepting who we are right now, is a marker of good goals. Also, attainable goals are ones that I can possibly achieve. Achieving little goals, as small as they may be, and stretching yourself to achieve those gives us the satisfaction and pride and raises our acceptance level of who we are and what we're achieving. So that when you establish goals, make them appropriate to what you have been doing, what you're capable of doing, what your lifestyle allows you to do right now, and make them attainable. Hope that makes sense, because if you don't, if you set your goals at a too lofty level, they demotivate yourself. It seems that a lot of our sports and performance areas now have been inundated with different types of statistics and measure seemingly every nuance of uh, our performances, ranging from pianists to baseball players with their sabermetrics to golfers with their shot lengths that really dissect the game. I'm still a great believer that data is important for us setting up more appropriate and attainable goals. Still, there are not measurements for commitment. There are not measures of levels of relaxation or concentration. There are not measurements for heart or passion or being a clutch performer. That's part of still the art of human performance. The statistics help us, but we should not define ourselves by these statistics. Years ago, I worked with the top woman high school basketball player in my state. And she was just wonderful, a joy to see the way she moved. She was a point guard, so she controlled the offense well. And she was paralyzed after a while with looking at her stats after every game. She thought that was a measure of it. And as much as I worked on, hey, you're more than your stats, she went into every game saying, I must score at least 13 points. I must have at least 7 assists. I must have at least 3 rebounds a game. And when she started comparing herself to these standards set by the statistics of previous games, she had very inconsistent and frustrating performances. Use your stats, use them appropriately, and keep them there. Use them as springboards to setting out some new goals and plans for performances. Here, as we enter principle 4, is having goals, but have them become process goals and qualitative goals instead of outcome goals or quantitative goals. Sometimes, like the basketball player, we can't achieve the numbers. Or even if we do achieve the numbers, we fall flat saying, okay, I've met those numbers. I don't have to do much now. Sometimes the numbers lead to this notion of outcomes. I will win, or I would score this that way. That these quantitative and outcome numbers don't put us in a position to control the things we need. Have you ever had a competitive performance, excuse me, where you played well and your opponent or opponents were just fabulous? They had maximal A-level performances. Good for them. You couldn't do anything about that. See, quantitative goals and outcome goals, some of those are outside of our direct control. As on the other hand, your process goals and qualitative goals, the qualities you want to be and exude, you do have control over those. It is natural to think about outcome goals. It is natural to think about number goals. Every time you do, break those things down further into the process goals or the qualitative goals, the qualities you want to exude. If you want to win, break those down into process goals, is that I have to go off to a good start. I have to minimize my mistakes. I have to finish strongly. I have to look forward to opportunities. Also, qualitative goals, you want to say, when you think about what it takes to win, you say, I want to be clear, calm, collected. I want to be poised. I want to have deep and sustained levels of concentration. I want to even relax and enjoy myself through that. Those qualitative goals and process goals are the things you can achieve. So maximize your time with your goals and goal setting. Stay away from being ground by and defined by statistics. Use those to help you set up more appropriate and attainable goals. During the practices and rehearsals, during the performances, it's nice to have outcome goals. It's nice to have quantitative goals. Every time you feel yourself constructing those kinds of goals, take them one step further into the processes, what you need to do during the practice or performance, and the qualities that you want to be or exude. These are subtle, and they make the distinction of using goals to your advantage. One last Bud Greenspan quote for this series. He said this: excellence is attained by those who care more than others think is wise, risk more than others think is safe, and dream more than others think is practical. Other people, well-intentioned, may have advice for you. Most often, this advice is governed in terms of limitations. People who excel push themselves. They give themselves the acceptance, they give themselves the qualitative and process goals to keep on pushing themselves outside of their comfort levels. Seek excellence, seek mastery, and enjoy your trips along the way. This is Tom Kubistant saying we'll see you next time for principle number 5.